we'll start. That's a good number. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Vicki Dixon. I'm an adult services librarian at the Northfield District Library. I'm going to be accompanied this evening by Wendy Much, who's the head of the Adult Services Department, and Michael McAvoy, who's the head of Information Technology. They're going to assist in executing this program. And I'd like to say thank you. I can't say enough for the Friends for bringing this forward. And this program is sponsored by the Friends of the Northfield District Library. Okay, the Tuskegee Airmen were the first Black military aviators trained at Tuskegee Airfield in Alabama. They flew more than 15,000 individual military missions in Europe, North Africa during World War II. We are pleased to have with us this evening both Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Jefferson and Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart of the 332nd Fighter Group of the Tuskegee Airmen, also known as the Redtails. After a short film clip, you will hear from these two American heroes, and they will share some of their experiences with us and answer some of your questions. So if we're ready, Michael, we can show the clip.
Okay, getting ready to share. Please mute your microphones.
Okay.
As they open, two German fighters move in to attack. The American bombers easy targets and in their sights. Suddenly, a U.S. Army Air Force's P-40 speeds into position between the bombers and German fighters. Maneuvering inside the enemy, the pilot unleashes a long burst of fire, watching tracers smash into his target. The German fighter lurches left, then drops from the sky as his wingman flees the fight. Neither the German fighters nor the American bombers realize that history has just been made. The pilot of the P-40 was Lieutenant Charles B. Hall of the 99th Fighter Squadron, better known today as the Tuskegee Airmen, the first African-American pilots in United States military history. This marked the first of more than 100 confirmed victories for the Airmen during World War II. Their story had begun 2 years earlier, when 13 recruits reported for training in Tuskegee, Alabama. To date, no Black man had been allowed to serve as a pilot in the United States military, a policy they were determined to change. Training was intense, and the men welcomed it. They knew they were making history. Promising recruits flocked to Tuskegee, and a new unit was formed, the 99th Fighter Squadron. By the spring of 1943, the squadron was ready for combat and ordered to North Africa to participate in the invasions of Sicily and Italy. They were later joined by 3 new squadrons, forming the 332nd Fighter Group and earning the nickname Redtails for the bright red paint on the fins of their P-51 fighters. As the Tuskegee Airmen's reputation grew, so did its ranks of acclaimed pilots. Among the unit's aviators was Charles McGee, who would go on to set an Air Force record of 409 combat missions during World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. There was Harry Stewart, who shot down 3 German fighters in one day, and Alexander Jefferson and Harold Brown, 2 of the 32 Tuskegee Airmen pilots who were shot down and held as prisoners of war. And there was Robert Friend, veteran of 142 combat missions, who served as wingman to the unit's leader, Benjamin O. Davis. Davis would go on to become the first African-American general officer in Air Force history. The pilots of the Tuskegee Airmen would fly missions over Central and Southern Europe, participating in the invasion of southern France in 1944, then fly over Germany in 1945. In just 2 years' time, a unit that many had not wanted to exist had proven to be one of the military's best. The Tuskegee Airmen had already become legendary. In all, 992 pilots were trained at Tuskegee, 355 deployed overseas during World War II, 84 lost their lives. In nearly 1,600 combat missions, they compiled an outstanding record, earning 3 Distinguished Unit Citations, a Silver Star, and 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses. But just as importantly, the Tuskegee Airmen proved to their countrymen and to themselves that they belonged alongside the great heroes of American military history. 75 years ago, they entered into World War II and into history. And 75 years later, they continue to inspire Americans to affirm that self-evident truth that all men are created equal.
What a wonderful legacy that is. Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson, you and Lieutenant Colonel Stewart are obviously the best and the brightest, the cream of the crop. How did they go about selecting you for the process? How did they eliminate the others? Lieutenant Jefferson?
Muted right now.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Okay.
How did they go about selecting you for the
Well,
Tuskegee?
entry into the Army Air Corps, you had to be a college graduate. You had to finish college to start, beginning. And there was a written examination before going into it. And until my class, they took high school graduates, but they had to go through 3 months of training in English and math to qualify. That was all part of it.
Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, how did you qualify for?
Well, just before World War II, the government established what was known as a selection of military or soldiers or civilians to be called into the service. It was called selective service at the time there. And all males who were anywhere from 18 to 36 years old were subject to be called into the service. In fact, they did have a quota, and they started calling those in the service on a lottery basis. As far as the Tuskegee Airmen were concerned, this was a newfound venture for them because the Air Force prior to that time, or the Air Corps prior to that time, practiced the segregation and did not select African Americans as far as pilot trainees were concerned. As Colonel Jefferson said, is that those that felt as though they were going to be selected or called into the service or wanted to volunteer for the service had to take an examination. And based on that examination, they were either rejected or called into the service. Once we as Tuskegee Airmen went in and were called into the service, it was done on a segregated basis, an absolutely segregated basis. However, the training was done from the same playbook as the rest of the Air Corps was involved. So the training was absolutely no different at all. The only thing is that we were at a segregated air base down in Tuskegee, Alabama. I'd like to just say that name will be used throughout maybe our discussion here. And that name arose as a result of a dentist by the name of Charles Francis having written a book about the African Americans who were flying. That's a Tuskegee. And for want of a name, he decided, since they all trained in Tuskegee, Alabama, that's what they would call them, the Tuskegee Airmen. It's an unofficial name. It's not a government recognized name, but it is named, recognized universally because of their exploits at the time.
Well done. Good.
Okay. I should also mention that if any of you have any questions that you'd like to direct to either of the lieutenant colonels, please reference that in the chat, and Wendy or Michael will unmute you and you will allow you to ask your own question. So,
Right. Good.
yeah, we want to get interaction going. We think it's a lot more energetic that way, and I think you'll get more enjoyment out of it as well. Okay. All right. So while we're waiting for people to put their questions in or acknowledge that they would like to ask a question, Michael and Wendy, you'll have to help me out here because I can't see those responses. So can we get a little bit of a background on both of you, starting with,
All right.
okay?
I was in college, going to Clark College in Atlanta, Georgia. And as long as I was subject to go to Tuskegee, Alabama, I was protected to keep out of the draft. During the war, all males after a certain age were subject to the draft. And I didn't want to be drafted to go to the Army. There's a buck private. I think I weighed 112, 113 pounds. And as long as I stayed subject to go to Tuskegee, Alabama, I was protected from the draft. That's why I went to the Army Air Corps. I tell everybody, I was proud to go to the Army Air Corps, stay away from the draft, which was segregated, as everybody knows. I was protected. But as soon as I graduated, in June 42, that's when I went down to the Federal Building in Detroit and volunteered for the Army Air Corps. Of course, I knew it was segregated, but there was protection anyway.
Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, a little bit of background, please.
Well, sure, if you permit me to read from my biography.
Sure.
I was having entered the military service in March of 1943. I was born July 4th, 1924 in Newport News, Virginia. During my infancy, my family relocated to New York City, where I attended both grammar and high school. At the onset of World War II, I enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps as an aviation cadet. After completing my flight training at Tuskegee Army Airfield, Alabama, and while still in my teens, I was awarded pilot wings and commissioned a second lieutenant.
How old were you then?
I was 19.
19.
Yes.
See, I was 22.
Right.
And by the way, a difference of 1 year or 2 years at that stage of our lives, we were completely different.
That's sure. That's a big deal. That's right. You're absolutely right.
You couldn't even buy a bottle of liquor.
That's true. That's true. That's
Flying
right.
a Mustang.
But I could fly a Mustang and I could not drive a car.
And that's something?
Yeah. Well, that was because, in New York, they have the rapid transit system.
Yeah.
And you didn't need a car. So my family not only couldn't afford one, but my family couldn't, need one at the time there. So I took the subway or the bus or the ferry or whatever it is to get around in New York City. And I didn't learn to drive until long after I was in the service.
But you were a second lieutenant at the age of what, 18? When you
19.
19.
Yes.
My golly. You were a youngster.
Yeah.
But in November of 44, I was sent overseas to the combat zone in Italy
Yeah.
where I was assigned to the 332nd Fighter Group, and that was both of us were assigned to the 332nd.
That's
When I went over, you were a prisoner of war all the time, which you'll certainly tell the folks about here. But when I got over there, I went to the same squadron that you were in, but you were in Germany or one of the prisoner of war camps at the time there.
Huh.
But anyway, I was with both of us with the 332nd Fighter Group, sometimes referred to as the Redtails.
right.
And depicted in the HBO movie featuring Lawrence Fishburne called The Tuskegee Airmen, and the subsequent movie by George Lucas, who produced Star Wars, but
Right.
he produced also a film called The Redtails. And while in combat, I flew 43 long-range missions, escort missions in the P-51 Mustang fighter plane.
Uh-huh.
After the war ended, I returned to the States and continued my military service as a fighter pilot until my discharge in 1950. During World War II, I was credited with destroying 3 enemy aircraft in aerial combat. And for that feat, I was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross along with the Air Medal with 6 oak leaf clusters. In 1949, I had another contest that I was in, which was similar to the Navy film Top Gun. And it was the first Top Gun that was done by the Air Corps. And I was on the winning team of that Top Gun tournament that they had at the time. And the first Top Guns in the World War II or after World War II were 3 pilots that represented the Tuskegee Airmen at the time there. But anyway, on my discharge from the service, I went back to my hometown in New York, and as Colonel Jefferson mentioned, you know, at the beginning of the program, as far as World War II was concerned, college graduates were the ones that were only accepted for training as pilots at the time there. But because of the extreme losses that we suffered at the very beginning of the war there, they lowered the standards, and they lowered them as far down as if you could pass the examination to go in, they would go ahead and accept you for training. So I recognized my lack of formal education when I got out of the service. So I decided to go back to school, and I enrolled in New York University. In fact, I had to go back and pick up some high school credits. But after that, I was 25 years old at the time, and I applied to New York University College of Engineering, and eventually got my bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. And after graduating, became employed in various engineering and construction firms throughout the United States. One of them being Bechtel Corporation in San Francisco, and another A&R pipeline company in Michigan here. And I retired from this present job, or that present job in Michigan, as Vice President of Administrative Services. I currently hold a commercial pilot's license in airplanes, gliders, seaplanes, and helicopters. And at 96 years old, I still enjoy piloting the aircraft sometime, even though I gave up going solo about 4 or 5 years ago, and I always go with another pilot now. Just not taking my chances with my age, even though I feel fine physically, but I may be deluding myself. Who knows?
I gave up completely.
Yeah, right. And when I took up the flying again, I was about 82 years old, and
82.
The Tuskegee Airmen had aircraft, motor gliders they were called, but what I did after I renewed my license in there. I used to take up local neighborhood kids and sort of give them a indoctrination of what it's like to be up in the air and fly around a bit, hoping that this might inculcate a desire into them for picking up the field of going into the field of aviation and studying such. And some of those kids did, and some of them today that I flew with at that time, and including female students there are now with the airlines. And one I think of, one of the females there, she's a captain in Delta Airline.
That gives you a heck of a good feeling.
It does.
Yes,
Right.
you're a pioneer. Certainly a pioneer. Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson, tell us about your military training and the fact that you were a POW.
Military training. I went through the training of being a pilot, which was the same as whites, the program of 9 months of training. As a pilot, fighter pilot with the 332nd Fighter. How many
We just
missions?
lost.
Had 28 complete missions. The 29th mission was the one in which we were supposed to strafe radar stations. We did not know that the invasion of southern France came off on the 15th. 1, 2, 3, 4. I gotta count. Yeah. The 15th of August, 1944. We had no idea that the invasion came off. We were given a mission on August the 12th to strafe, knock out radar along the southern coast of France. And our target, where we went in and strafed it, we peeled off at about 15,000 feet and went in, shoved everything to the wall. I think we were doing about 380, 390 near the red line, and start firing at the buildings and the little next to all the radar stations. Our job, not the radar itself, but the buildings right next to the radar with all the mechanics. And while doing so, we were doing about 380, 390, close to red line. And as I went by, I got hits on the station, on the building, and I was about 100 feet, and something said, boom. I shook, and the next thing I knew, fire came up out of the floor where the shell had hit. Automatically, first thing I did, pull back on the stick to get some altitude, because I knew I was going to have to bail out. By the time I got up to next, I suspect now, maybe 10, 15, 30 seconds, I was up at 7 or 8,000 feet. I have no idea how high. All I knew, I had to get out. And when I pulled back on the stick and reach up, pull a little red knob, the whole canopy went off. I turned the stick loose, and propulsion, I was thrown out. I hit that big buckle. You have straps with a big buckle. And I hit that buckle, and I came out. And as the tail went by, I said to myself, boy, here you go. Pull the D-ring, and when the parachute popped, I'm going down through the trees. My introduction and welcoming to the land of southern France. And all of a sudden in the background, I heard a heavy German influenced voice, Ach so, ja, the Leutnant. And I looked down, I'm in the trees. I look down, there's a German soldier saluting me because he saw my little gold bar on my collar. That's my introduction to 9 months in Germany, in southern France and Germany as a prisoner of war. Other than that, it was interesting.
Other than that, it was interesting.
Other than that, it was interesting.
How did you survive in the prisoner of war camp? What did you do to pass the time?
Listen, you get to the stage where you say to yourself, damn it, I've got to make it. And don't tell me you can't make it. I think I weighed 112, 113, 100, maybe 115 pounds. And although rations were scarce, I thought that I had my proportion of the meals in the room. There were 10 men to a room. That goes different. But you find yourself surviving. Surviving. Walking. Hell, we walked 80 kilometers. Temperature 15 to 20 below zero. You survive. You tell yourself, damn it, get up and go. Maybe later on in Vietnam, we had some of our soldiers kick off and die. They gave up. Hell no, you don't give. You survive. All my 9 months was fighting to survive. It goes into deeper things. But
yes,
I survived after World War, came back to Detroit and stayed in the reserves, became a school teacher, elementary science. I had a hell of a good time. I enjoyed it. Especially.
Vicki, may I ask the Colonel a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeff, how did you, being such a lightweight, how did you pass the physical examination to get in the service?
The guy looked at the indicator and said, you only weigh 115, 100. Tell you what you do, buddy. Go downstairs and drink some water. As much as you can. He turned me loose. I went downstairs in the federal building. Drank water until it came out of my ears. Went back up, ate to the ninth floor, got on the scales, and went over 116 pounds. Actually, 115 and some ounces. Bang! The sergeant said, buddy, you're in. 115, 116 pounds full of water. The only reason why I made the cadets. But I was determined not to go to the buck private as a soldier in a black unit catching hell in the Army.
Okay. We're going to take some questions from the audience.
Sure.
Can you unmute Grace? She has a question that she'd like to ask.
Me?
Yes, Grace. Oh, we can't see you.
Yeah, okay, I'll just go. I was wondering while you were fighting, were you like ever scared or were you just brave and just kept on going?
I was scared.
Understand.
Yeah.
My hearing is very, very bad. Tell it to get up closer to the mic or somebody interpret.
Yeah, she asked when you were fighting, were you very, very brave or were you very scared?
Never thought of that. Huh. No, we had a job. Our mission was a knockout radar. I'm busy flying, just like, by the way, the same way you're busy driving a car. Because your mind says, you're staying in for, you're flying actually, you're flying this airplane and you have a mission to do, you have a job to do, and you did your job. I didn't think about it. Flying. Huh, that's weird. 100 years later, asking and determining how you felt.
What about you, Mr. Stewart?
Well, that question was aptly put by a great fighter pilot that we had in the country, but they asked him what it was like in combat. And he said it was absolute boredom, punctuated by moments of absolute terror. And that's the way it was.
Yeah.
That's the way it was with us. That's the way it was with us because we had these long-range missions escorting the bombers there, and truly it was boring just circling over the bombers there and going along for maybe around.
By the way, taking off and flying to southern France, spent about an hour, but it was boredom. Flying along, staying in formation, watching your instruments, it was boredom. In the last 15 or 20 seconds, where you shove everything to the wall, pick up speed, aim your plane, press the trigger, and the guns are firing, and boom, you have to bail out. Pull that ripcord, and as you look at and watch the ripcord, and the parachute opens, and you're in the trees. And the crazy part about it, you don't get scared until it's all over, and you sit down and you start thinking about what happened. Then you get scared as hell, considering.
Yeah.
My God.
Mm. Huh. Aiden has a question. Can we, Aiden, unmute yourself?
Yeah. My question is that, when you were going out, when you were escorting the bombers, were you what places did you bomb?
Well, we bombed anywhere from in the enemy territory, but most of our bombing was done in northern Italy. That was the short range missions up into Central Europe, Germany, Austria, Poland, all of those countries in Central Europe there. The furthest mission that the 15th Air Force that we went on was Berlin. It was an 800-mile round trip.
Yes.
And it kept the fighters in the air about 6.5 hours. It was awfully grueling physically because we were strapped in the fighter planes. We were completely strapped in the planes there, so you couldn't get up or walk around or anything. You were in a fixed position that entire 6.5 hours, and it became quite laborious like that. The bombers now, they could get up, the bomber pilots, and the bomber crew, because the bombers were much larger and they could get up and walk around in the bomber itself. Our protecting these bombers, you know, the big thing was that there was only one pilot in the plane that we were flying. It was the fighter pilot himself. But in the bombers, there were 10 crew members in there. And if one of those planes got shot down, that was 10 men that were lost for each plane. Yeah. So we felt an onus of a real responsibility in protecting those men who were in the bombers there, because we had a lot of freedom as far as the maneuvering of the fighter plane was concerned, not so much inside, but maneuvering around the bombers there.
Okay.
Good.
Vanessa, you have a question?
What were some of the best memories of being in the airmen, in the Tuskegee Airmen?
Yeah.
I didn't hear that.
She said, what were some of the best memories of being a Tuskegee Airman?
Well, knowing that you put on that uniform, sharp, with the insignia, sharp caps, because the uniform itself spoke the accomplishment of being in the Air Force. Life was segregated. As a black person, through the Air Force, Army Air Corps, and to be able to put on that uniform with those wings. Those wings, they spoke. You saw other members of the Army Air Corps, other Army, anywhere you go. It was exciting. Life was exciting. I enjoyed it. I tell everybody I had a darn good time.
Well, I always wanted to fly, and as I mentioned, I was born in Newport News, Virginia, not too far from a air base called Langley Field at the time there. But my parents tell me that they would put me out in the crib, and the planes from Langley Field might be flying over, and they said before I could even talk, I would sort of wave and coo at the plane's flag overhead. So I think they told me that they thought that maybe I was capturing a desire and a fantasy of flying, even at that time. But we moved to New York, the family moved to New York, and we moved out to Queens, and we were in walking distance to an airport that was in Queens there by the name of North Beach Airport. It was a combination military and civilian field there. By the way, that airport was rededicated in 1939, and it was renamed LaGuardia Airport.
Yeah.
So I used to go over there when I was a kid and just stand by the fence there and watch the planes taking off and landing, especially the transport planes, and fantasize about my being a pilot in the plane and taking off and landing the plane, having never been in one before, but just seeing them in the air. And then the opportunity came when I got into the Cadet Corps, and I'll never forget my first solo when I took a plane up by myself and flew it around. And then after that was just experiences that I had of being up in the air, up at altitude, and being able to see the vista in front of me. And I guess the most awesome thing I ever saw was when I was escorting the bombers overseas. Well, a raid that we had could entail as much as 700 bombers and maybe a few fighters.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of the first missions that I was on, I was flying Tail End Charlie, and that was the last guy in the whole string of bombers and fighters there. And we used to, the bombers would start letting out these, what they call contrails. You see them up in the air with the planes flying over today, those big white streamers coming from the engines there, and they're called condensation trails. But anyway, I would see hundreds of these trails in front of me there, and then the fighters, in order to stay they're so much faster than the bombers. In order to stay with the bombers, they made these S-turns over the bombers, and then there would be these streamers over the bombers there, and it was a sight to behold. It was a ballet in the air there, and I'll never see a sight like that again, because one bomber and one bomb can do as much damage
Yeah.
as all of the bombers and all of the bombs in World War II. But I did, and the times of peaceful times when I wasn't engaged in the fighting itself there, I really enjoyed the air. Being up in the air, it's a different type of venue or atmosphere, or whatever you might call it, but it was just a pleasure.
David, you have a question. Unmute yourself. David Wayne.
There we go. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming tonight. I have actually two questions, one for Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson and one for Lieutenant Colonel Stewart. Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson, as a published author, what advice would you give students as they approach a writing assignment? The reason why I ask is that I'm a 5th grade teacher like you, and some of my students are here tonight. So any advice from a published author would be fantastic. And then for Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, what advice would you give someone that wants to study mechanical engineering college?
Math.
So,
Math. Math.
lots of math.
And take reading. Public English language. Nobody wants a dummy, damn it. Nobody wants a dummy. That covers it. All my experience of teaching, all of a sudden, the city youngsters sit there, you go through these principles every day, and all of a sudden, this kid will jerk up, stand up, and a smile comes on, and his eyes will open, and he'll say, "Oh yeah, bingo." It's hidden. Math, English, interpreting.
Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson.
Yeah.
Stop the music.
What about book writing? How did you go about writing your book? What advice would you give to those who would like to write a book about their lives?
Tell you the truth, I had a diary. Oh, my book was as a result of a diary, a daily diary. I mention things every day. And the last thing, it's hard for me to give advice because I sat down and simply wrote from day to day things that happened. And Lou Carlson, a writer and an author, and he's the guy that took all my writings and put them together and organized them day by day, chapter by chapter. Oh.
Granddad,
Yes.
if you were teaching a class of youth today, how would you get them motivated to write a story about themselves?
To write a story about themselves. Somebody's got to be famous. Why not you? Somebody's got to be famous. Somebody's got to write about a hero. You love yourself? Good. Write about yourself. The greatest person in the world. If you don't love yourself, unquote, personal personal things. You got to love yourself. Respect. Plus some math. Here I go again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, we obviously heard about math. Or again, mechanical engineering, we know math, but any other advice for someone that really wants to pursue those areas in college?
Yeah, well, you know, I think you have to have that inbuilt desire, I guess, if you want to be an engineer, to solve problems. And these problems can be in the area of not just mechanical engineering, but all engineering. And when you do go through engineering school, you're going to get a smattering of a little bit of all of the types of engineering that there's out there: chemical engineering, electrical engineering, but you're majoring in the mechanical engineering there. Alex was right. I'm sorry, Colonel Jefferson was absolutely right. Math is the language of engineering, and you're going to have to become adept with that new math that they have. But another thing is, are you sure is that what you want? And I would say to test yourself and find out if this is what you really like, is to associate yourself with somebody who's an engineer or an engineering firm, or when you go out for your summer session, that you can maybe get a part-time job with an engineering firm or something like that, to see exactly what they're doing, so that it's just not a fantasy that you have there, but it's a practical and a well-felt desire. So I would say hang around with engineers, or hang around with people who have experience with engineers, hang around and get into an office or something like that where they do engineering. And if you've got that curiosity for solving problems and solving physical problems, that's a good head start for you. And I go back to what Colonel Jefferson said. Yes, math is the language. So while you're aspiring towards that, wanting to be an engineer, there is take those subjects that will enhance your understanding of the discipline, and do your mathematics, and also absolutely language is very, very important. Not only being able to get people to understand you, but so that you can understand other people there, the communications. And that's what technically, the word that we applied in the school for it was communications, the art of communications. Very, very important in engineering. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, David. Lila, unmute yourself.
Hi. So I've heard stories about how soldiers were treated when they returned home. How were both of you guys treated when you returned?
She's heard stories about how you were treated when you returned home. How were you all treated?
Well, it was the same old as far as I was concerned. There were handicaps that I had, just like the colonel there, that he had there. And unfortunately, some of those same handicaps that I had before going into the service were the same handicaps I discovered when I got out. And specifically, as an example, was that after all of the hours that I acquired in flying and the skills that I applied in flying, is when I got out of the service, I said, I think I want to get into the airlines. And I certainly have a good head start with all of the background I have in flying. And I went to two large companies, two of the largest aviation companies that were in the United States at the time, and I was rejected by both of them. And as I said, it was the same old, but it was then that I decided, well, there are other things I can get under my belt that I think would help me very much, because as I said before, is that I think I was handicapped when I went into, and I had handicapped myself when I went into the service, because I did not have the quality and quantity. I had the pretty quality of education, but certainly not the quantity that I should have. So at 25 years old, believe it or not, I found myself sitting in high school to get some of the subjects that I was deficient in, and then decided later on to go and get my degree in engineering, and it paid off.
Yep.
And I was able to, at that time there, is to hold that piece of paper up there in front of the people that I was applying with, and the door opened and took me in. And as I said, I didn't think about it at that time, but when I retired, I ended up as a vice president of a Fortune 500 company.
But you see, after World War II, think about it. This is 1945 when this is before Martin Luther King. This is before we were black. We were Negroes. We had not gone through this period of fighting for our rights. We were segregated. Below the Mason-Dixon line, we were black. We were colored. There are a lot of other places where we were denied places. Even in the North, we were segregated. In certain parts of Detroit, we could not buy a house. Certain parts of living, we had not gone through, as I said, Martin Luther King, with all the rest of the rights. Things were different. Things were different.
Okay. Phyllis. Hi, Phyllis. Unmute yourself.
Well,
Hi there.
Hi.
all right.
This is really great. Thank you so much for providing this forum, Vicki. And I thank Mr. Jefferson and Mr. Stewart for your time and for your service, obviously. The young people who have spoken earlier had such great questions. My question is, it's definitely not an intellectual one, but I just wanted to know on behalf of my husband, Harold, how do you feel about the movies, the Tuskegee Airmen and Redtails? Do you think that it gives a good Hollywood version of your story?
Somebody had to do it. We'll look upon it. Somebody had to do it. It's a start. It's a start. But much of it was corn, such as who was the main black? Oh, God.
And Tuskegee Airmen was Lawrence Fishburne.
All right. Lawrence Fishburne walks by an enlisted man who has a job, and he tells the enlisted man, "You got some extra paint? Oh, you got some extra red paint? Paint the damn red. Paint the tail red." Can anybody think about an enlisted man with the responsibility of painting the tail of an airplane red? It's unheard of. The order for red paint was done by higher headquarters, the 15th Air Force Command. Why red? We happened to catch red. There was another white group, yellow. There's another group, Harry, give me a. There was a
That
white.
was the 25th, that was Checker Tail, and the 31st, that was Candy Stripe.
Candy, red and white stripe. When you saw an airplane with a red and white stripe, you knew it was what group?
The 31st Fighter Group.
The 31st Fighter Group. When you saw a solid red tail, you knew it was the 332nd Fighter Group. We were the, as we call ourselves, we were the spooks. We were designated.
The Redtails.
The Redtails. So that the bombers knew who we were. Identification. It was strictly identification.
Okay. Mrs. Stewart, what do you think about Hollywood version of those two movies?
Well, it's what I call typical Hollywood, you know, and it's 95%, 95%, what would you call it? I didn't say fiction, corn, or whatever it is to attract you, you know, and 5% fact, okay? And that's about what it was. But I can't knock them because, you know, let me tell you what happened as far as these movies are concerned. You'll find some bit of truth in both of those movies. That was the HBO movie called the Redtails, not called the Tuskegee Airmen, and the George Lucas film called the Redtails. And there's a certain amount of truth in both of those films there, but there was a lot of other stuff that I call, well, I started to call it junk, but I do want to compliment HBO, and I want to compliment Lucas, because
absolutely,
those films were seen by people all over the world.
Yes.
And a group that was prior to that time practically unheard of by the general public became known throughout the world, these Tuskegee Airmen. So they did do a service as far as getting them to be recognized as an occurrence and as a group during World War II.
Well, thank you so much for your answers, and continue to tell the story.
Okay. All right. So do we have any other questions from the audience? While we're waiting for...
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is Lieutenant King. Hi, Jefferson, and hi, Stewart.
Hey,
King.
How you doing?
How you guys doing?
Good.
I just want to thank you. You know, I've been around you guys for about 25 years, and I want to thank you guys. I've been in the service. I did 30 years, but you were the guys that I stood on their shoulders to continue this legacy that the Tuskegee has. And I really appreciate all the things you have taught me over the years, and listening to all your stories. I mean, I have so much that I always remember you two guys as just being like my two fathers that I had in the service. So I really appreciate everything you've done. And I hope that you know, you continue to do what you can while you're here. Thank you.
Thank you, good. Thank you. It simply means that we came out of the service. We had a job to do. Some of us had an inkling to try to straighten out some of our black boys. It was a hell of a job to teach a boy, a black boy, how to become a man in a crazy ZZZ world, and especially a segregated world. So many black boys going downhill, and many of us had a responsibility, a feeling that we had to teach them how to become a man in a vicious, segregated world. We had success in some places. Other places, we didn't have any success, but we tried. And our work in the reserve, Air Force Reserve, in all the different schools we went into, in different air bases, we tried. And we had some success. We enjoyed it. We had a heck of a good time. And we still have it down underneath.
Well, Vicki, may I?
And keep on.
Okay. All right, so we have a question. Vanessa, you have another question? You're still muted, Vanessa.
Did the Tuskegee Airmen have a motto? And if you did, how did you come up with it?
Did you have a motto? And if you do or did, how did you come up with it?
Motto?
A motto, M-O-T-T-O, motto.
Nobody worried about a motto. There's a bunch of rules and regulations that you had to learn. What did we do? Harry, what were those crazy?
We had what they called dodo verses, and they were hand-me-down disciplinary verses that we had to learn as fledgling cadets, and they were handled down by a number of people who came into the organization from West Point.
Right.
And it was what they had learned when they spent their 4 years in West Point. Dodo verses like, how's a cow? And you had to recite in an erect position, a cow, she walks, she talks, she's full of chalk, she's full of the bovine species.
Coffee.
Yeah, something to the, I forget. What time is it, dummy? Sorry, sir, my chronometer, and you would recite that verse. I'm forgetting them right now, but these are just disciplinary verses that you had to learn at the time. They weren't mottos. They were just verses that the upperclassmen thrust upon the lowerclassmen there. But may I answer a question by asking a question?
Sure.
And it's going to come up after this program is over for people who didn't ask it. But tell me about the demographics of the Tuskegee Airmen. How many of them were there? You know, where did they come from? That type of thing. Well, let's start out. And the empirical rule that you had as far as the ratio of pilots to support personnel on the ground. And when I say support personnel, I'm talking about cooks, bottle washers, doctors, nurses, drivers,
right,
all of that sort of thing, was normally maybe anywhere from 10 to 15 to 1. In other words, 10 people, ground people, instructors, and things like that to every pilot that was trained. Because of the segregated nature of the group that we had, it was more like 15 or 16 to 1. So the pilots that graduated from Tuskegee, the full number was almost 1,000. So
yeah,
just so we won't worry our heads, just call it 1,000. So if it's 15 to 1, that would be 15,000 the ground people to support these pilots for every pilot that was there. So that would make a total of as I said, of 16,000. Now, of the 100 pilots that, the 1,000 pilots that graduated from Tuskegee, 355 of them went overseas.
Yeah.
Okay. And of that 355 that went overseas, something like 84 lost their lives overseas.
84. Remember
Of
these
the
numbers.
300, of the 355 that went overseas, 35 were shot down as prisoner of war, such as Colonel Jefferson there.
35.
And also of that 350, 55 that went overseas, about 7 were what they called evadees. An evadee is a person that goes down, crashes in enemy territory, but is imagined, but is able to evade the enemy and get back to his unit there. There were 7 of those. And of course, you can imagine the plight of the Afro-American trying to get through Central Europe, you know, without being discovered or something like that.
Exactly.
It's an interesting thought there. So that's about the total numbers that you have there. Oh, I left out one. Of the 355 that went overseas, there are 8 that are living today. So that's the demographics as far as the Tuskegee Airmen.
By the way,
How many Purple Hearts?
I'm not too sure as far
I'm
as
not too sure. I'm not too
We
sure.
estimated 7.
There are more than that because of the 32 guys shot down, more than likely, more than 6 or 7 were injured.
But only 7 was given out to you guys.
Yeah.
There should have been more.
Yeah, that's what's known to us, but a lot of it is speculative, and getting this information is rather difficult, So anyway.
Okay.
So that's the demographics, Vicki.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Judy, you have a question.
I don't really have a question as much as I am just in awe of these fine patriots for our country. I am just in awe, and it is an honor for me to listen to you two men. And this is a treasured moment for me and for my husband. We had to take our dog out. I'm the mother of a veteran. His name is Matt. He's on this strand also. But the things that you've done to advance not only yourself, but for all people of all colors, especially for the Black people. And I think racism needs to I hope it stops. And I think the young people are helping on with that. And I just pray for you too. And thank you so much for sharing and for your service, each of you. All honor and respect and blessings go to each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
As I said before, we came back after the war and we had a job to do. I didn't get into this. I should have covered it somewhere along the line. Who was the mayor of Detroit?
Coleman Young. Coleman Young.
Who?
Coleman Young.
I heard that. I wanted it loud enough for everybody to hear it.
Okay.
Coleman Young. Penny Baylor's husband. What was his name?
Baylor.
Kermit.
Yeah.
Kermit what?
Baylor.
He was the lawyer?
Something like that.
Something like that. There were others. Teachers.
Mm.
There were other members who were mayors of other cities. Mayor of Cleveland. Can't remember right now. Ding-a-ling. Ooh. Ding-a-ling.
Something's ringing.
You don't feel bad. We don't know it either.
Oh no, his telephone was talking in his ears.
Somewhere there's a list of all of the men who had a job after the war, had some position, and they were listed. Wish I had it with me. I'll have it the next time.
Dick Macon.
Dick Macon?
Mayor Stokes out of Cleveland.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mayor Coleman Young out of Detroit.
All right. Dick Macon, teacher here in Detroit. Who was a teacher at Cass Tech? Electronics.
Gil Cargill.
Cargill was a pilot flying. Downs. Walter Downs.
Walter Downs.
Math teacher at Cass Tech. Somebody else.
Percy Heath was a jazz musician.
We're all over the country.
If anyone remembers Mays Printing in Detroit, Carlton Mays was a
Carlton Mays.
The original editor and publisher of the newsletter at
The newspaper at Tuskegee.
Don Thomas.
Donald
Thomas.
Yes. Okay. Judy, did you have another question? Your hand is up. You're muted.
Bill Wheeler.
Okay, wait, she answered. Hold on.
Question. I just love this whole thing.
Oh. All right. You didn't have another question, Judy?
No, I don't.
Okay. There is one here. Someone is asking how old you gentlemen are now.
How
old are you?
November the 15th.
And you will be?
100.
Oh.
100 years old. Awesome. Absolutely awesome.
No, don't say it. Somebody had to do it. Hell.
I'll be 97 this July 4th.
Oh, great.
97.
Wow. Unbelievable. Okay, so there were 6 guiding principles of the Tuskegee Airmen. Do you remember those, right? Of those principles, which one has had the most impact on your lives and your perseverance in life? Which of those 6 principles meant the most to you? And those 6 principles are aim high.
Aim high.
Uh-huh. Expect to win. Never quit.
Never quit.
Ready to go.
Ready to go.
Use your brain.
That's it.
And believe in yourself. Which one of those principles meant the most to you?
Use your brain.
Never quit.
Believe in yourself. You'd be surprised at the number of guys who quit because it was too hard. They give you this chicken, oh, I couldn't do that. It was too hard. Hell no, it doesn't get hard. Life is not hard. Life is a challenge. It's an old saying, almost like you kick them in the butt. Wake up. Enjoy life. Tomorrow.
I love your positivity. I can't even believe that you're so positive and vital at this age, and you were a prisoner of war for 9 months. It's just unbelievable.
Well, surviving as a POW. You got to survive. The food came from International Red Cross, and we were in rooms. There were 10 men to a room, and you got a box of food, and you had to divide it up, serve it. I'm trying to do this thing. But the whole idea, you had to survive. Life is a challenge. Nobody wants to treat you nice. It's a challenge to live. It's a challenge to survive. Aim high, yes. Because tomorrow brings out a new day. It's a new challenge. But these are some of the 7 there they are.
Well, I don't necessarily go along with them, and I hate to be dissident, but you know, like never quitting. I guess I might change that a little bit, is knowing when to quit, and that's what I do. And I did quit on a couple of occasions, and I think it was a question of knowing when to quit. For instance, my being rejected by the airlines. And I don't think they were ready for me at the time. And possibly I was not even ready for them. But anyway, knowing when to quit and going to something else. And that's when I went into engineering. I decided to go back to school and get my degree in mechanical engineering. And it was the best thing I ever did do. I mean, to me, it saved my life there. And the getting that education, it meant so much to me. I didn't realize when I was doing it exactly how much it would mean to me, but it eventually meant so much to me. And there's the question, as I said, of knowing when to quit.
Okay. I see there are a few more questions. Aiden and Amani, you have questions?
It's actually Amani who has a question. Thank you for your service. God bless you. Goodbye.
Oh, so sweet. Vanessa, you have another question?
Is there any further reading on the Tuskegee Airmen you would recommend, or the books that you wrote?
Yes. I'm glad you asked that. I'm very glad you asked that. This book was written by a gentleman by the name of Philip Handelman. He lives in Michigan here. He lives up near Lake Orion. He owns a sky ranch up there, and the sky ranch is built on 169 acres that he owns up there. He is a renowned historian and writer. And one of the finest people that I met when I moved to Michigan here was Philip Handelman. And it was after years that we had known each other. He asked me, and thought it was such a compliment, that he would like to write a book or an autobiography about me, and that's what he did with this book here. And it's not that I'm in the book, it's what the book contains. I think it's a full, excellent treatise on the Tuskegee Airmen, a treatise on certain airplanes that were flown during World War II, a treatise on the makeup of the Air Corps at that time there, a treatise on the blacks in aviation. And it's sort of his development of carrying me through this whole episode of World War II until the period post-World War II. I think he does a fantastic job, and I would recommend, if you can just go ahead and pick it up in the library and take it out for a while and read it. It's pretty fast reading, and read it. I say that you'll really enjoy it. And as I said, it's Philip Handelman. It's not me. It's Philip Handelman's writing, but he happened to just carry me along in the picture there in order to bring continuity to what was going on in the whole expose that he has in the book.
Okay. And Pat, you have a question? Go ahead. You're muted, Pat. Okay.
I do have a question. And both of you had mentioned the Tuskegee Airmen were segregated, but when you flew the missions and the aircraft you used, and from a technology standpoint, did you have the same level of advances that other divisions within the Air Force flew and used?
Yes.
Every bit. We had the same technicians, same mechanics, same background. Yes.
Thank you.
Our job, by the way, and as I may have mentioned before, our job was to protect those 10 people that were in each bomber there. That was our only job, is to protect them and to see that as best possible that they got back home safely. And in order to do that meant that we would have to do things like ward off enemy aircraft and fight enemy aircraft and that type of thing. But the whole objective was to protect those bombers so that they could get to their targets. The primary mission, to protect those bombers so that they can get to the targets there. But the outcome, the primary outcome, was to get those men back home safely. And that was our job.
In order to do that job, we had to have aircraft that were sustained, P-51 models. And of course, we had to have mechanics who understood and were darn good mechanics. They had to be qualified, capable of maintaining our aircraft.
Can you tell us about the flying formations coming in with the bombardier crew? How did you meet up since you were in separate barracks?
Oh, by radio. We knew the time. We knew the time that we were supposed to meet the bombers going out, and we would stay with them, orbiting, flying on top, above them, all the time on top, until our time was up. We would stay with them, what, 2.5 or 3 hours, 2.5 to 3 hours. We'd leave them, and another group, another fighter group, would arrive on time to pick up protection. But it was done by radio and by time.
Navigation. That was the important thing, is navigation.
Navigation.
And every fighter pilot had to be an expert navigator. And not only was he an expert navigator, he was a radio operator. He was a gunner.
Yes.
He was a bombardier. And as I said, a radio man there. But navigation was the biggest thing. And I guess the biggest study that we had in flying there was navigation. And there are so many means of navigation. But there's dead reckoning, and there's astral navigation, and contact, they call it, all different kinds. But that was it, the means of our finding the bombers, rendezvousing with the bombers. That's the big thing, the word that we used is rendezvous with the bombers. And the rendezvous was made possible by understanding navigation.
Okay. Carlotta, you have a question? Unmute yourself, please.
I really don't have a question. I just wanted to thank the Northville Public District Library for this presentation, and also mention that the Detroit chapter and the chapters of the Tuskegee Airmen on Monday, Memorial Day, will follow up and dedicate 4 bronze statues of the Tuskegee Airmen at the Coleman A. Young International Airport, which is Detroit City Airport. It's at 11499 Connor Avenue. And so it's Memorial Day, and if folks want to drive by as the statues are being dedicated and unveiled, it would be an awesome treat on Memorial Day 2021 to see the 4 bronze statues dedicated to the work of the Tuskegee Airmen, honoring, of course, Coleman A. Young, who was a Tuskegee Airman, honoring Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart, and honoring Lieutenant Colonel Alex Jefferson. And thank you for this presentation. It's awesome to get to see our folks highlighted.
At noon.
And it happens at 12 noon on Monday, Memorial Day, May 31st.
12 noon.
Thank you. Thank you for that public service announcement.
Don't mention it. Mention it, my drive-by.
Oh,
Vanessa, you have another question?
I just wanted to know, what was one of the last battles you were in before VE Day?
I didn't hear that.
One of the last battles that you were in before you were, before what?
VE Day?
VE Day.
That was my last mission. Mention this. Good.
Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson, you were part of the group that liberated a concentration camp. Is that correct?
No.
No, it was not a concentration camp. It was a POW.
Okay. Prisoner of war in Germany?
Prisoner of war. Prisoner of war, POW. Not a concentration, that's completely different from Dachau. By the way, I saw Dachau.
Okay.
At the end of the war, as we were leaving our camp, going up to get on the boat and come back home, I was with a group of guys, and we had liberated a Jeep, and we came back and passed Dachau. I saw Dachau after the war ended, with the piles and piles of dead bodies.
Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, can you tell us about your fallen comrade?
Walter Manning?
Walter Manning.
Yeah, in answer to that question and the one before, it's as far as the biggest battle or the last battle before the VE Day there. We were on a mission to Austria, and the understanding was that after we got the bombers safely there to near Vienna, is that a portion of us that were protecting them would remain in the target area and seek out targets of opportunity. Now, a target of opportunity meaning anything to go ahead and disrupt the Axis powers as far as their war effort was concerned. That would mean shooting up with our machine guns, shooting up river traffic, barge traffic along the Danube, shooting up rolling stock on the land. And of course, if there were enemy aircraft in the vicinity there, is to engage with the enemy aircraft. This responsibility was given to 7 of us at the time there. And after the bombers headed back, we remained in the target area, and we were just looking for trouble, looking for any opportunity to do damage to the Axis war effort there. And we found it, and we found it in the as far as the enemy aircraft were concerned. We ran into a horde of FW-190 German fighters. We engaged with them, and 3 of us got shot down, and out of the 7 of us. The first one actually made it back to friendly territory. He made it back to an island just off the coast of Yugoslavia, an island called Vis. And it was a way station for planes that might be damaged or having some trouble, Allied planes, of course. And this was an Allied base that was on that island there. And James Fisher, and he made it back there and eventually made it back home across the Adriatic to our home base. The second pilot was from Boston, Massachusetts, and his name was, goodness gracious, I'm sorry. It'll come to me. But anyway, he was shot down and he was killed instantly. The third person, his name was Walter Manning from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His plane was shot up pretty badly and he had to bail out. Well, when he alighted, there was a mob waiting for him on the ground, and when they captured him, he was taken to the local jailhouse in a town by the name of Lenz in Austria, and he was put in the jailhouse. But the Nazi contingent that was either with that crowd or that knew of his being in that jail, they whipped up the Austrian crowd there. And 2 nights later, after they put him in the jailhouse there, this crowd broke in and they dragged him out of the jailhouse. They beat him up pretty badly, and then they hung him from a lamppost. And we know all about that because of 2 things. We know our intelligence service was able to find out about it. And also, I must say, I have to give the Austrian government credit because they recognized many years after, and they had to show they were quite and to show their sorrow about what their citizens had done. They presented a memorial to Walter, and it's a beautiful memorial. Well, funny coincidence, this happened on Easter Sunday, and the same day was April 1st. You can look it up on the calendar. This was in 1945. Well, that day repeated itself in 2018, because Easter Sunday in 2018 also was on April the 1st, and it was also April Fool's Day. My daughter and I, we were very fortunate, and the government invited us over for the ceremony that they were holding for Walter Manning. And they presented just an absolute beautiful ceremony or memorial as far as he was concerned. By and large, he was not the only American that this happened to as far as the war crimes were concerned. We were flying also up there into Austria with the South Africans, with the New Zealanders, with the English, Canadians, and I think there were a couple of others but all of them lost crew members up in that area there, and some of them were the same thing. They were lynched, just like Walter Manning was lynched there, and the people who were in Austria at the time there, or some of them, felt as though these American pilots or those Allied pilots who had come in there were just as responsible for the deaths of their people as anybody else, and they took revenge or avenged those dead by executing, in some cases, there the crew members that went down. That was the last battle that I had that I can think of. That was lives in in my memory.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we should not forget that Memorial Day is also to honor those fallen in the war. Okay. Max, you have a question.
So I was wondering, what was something that you something unique that you brought home from the war?
Vicki, can you repeat that question?
Yes. What was something unique that you brought home from the war?
I brought myself home.
Very good.
I'm trying to tell you. I learned how to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget your drawings.
Someone said, don't forget your drawings, Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson.
Guard.
Drawings.
Oh, my drawings. Oh, I
Yeah.
hung on to those. My God, yes. Wherever I went, I made some picture, some detail. And no matter what happened,
Thank you.
but I always held on to my drawings.
And what about you, Lieutenant Colonel Stewart?
Oh, I guess was the brought who?
A brother-in-law.
Oh, I brought you. Oh, yes. Oh, I forgot. Oh, my dear wife. Bless her soul. I never would have met her had I not been in the service and had not come home from Italy at the time that I did. But her brother was in the same squadron with me.
Oh, yeah, Bob Friend.
Yes. And he lived in Manhattan and I lived in Queens. They're just a borough apart there. And when we got home, he called up and he said, Harry, he says, I'd like you to come over and meet my family. Little did I know that, well, I could call it a setup, but it was a beautiful setup because I met the lady of my life and we had a 68-year marriage that, anyway, it was just one of the most wonderful things that happened to me during my time. And it was a product of my my going into the service and being where I was at the time, that type of thing. And had it not been that way, I would not have met her. Of course, maybe I wouldn't have even known that she existed, but I did meet her, and it was such a pleasant marriage. 68 years, who could complain about something like that, you know? Anyway, he did the same thing to another fellow, by the way, and another classmate of his. He had another sister, you know, and he called the guy up and said, "I'd like you to come meet my family," and that ended the same way. So somebody asked him one time and said, well, did you do this again? And he says, no, I never did that again. And they said, why? He said, I ran out of sisters.
Oh, brother. I came home and I was an instructor at Tuskegee. I was an instructor, seniors, the last classes that came out. And running up and down the airfield on a scooter, I saw a young lady, quite attractive, and she was a parachute technician. And I met Adela, parachute technician at Tuskegee Army Airfield. And after a number of years, we stayed together 25 years.
Okay. All right. Teresa, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. First, I want to say thank you both very much for your service. And I wanted to ask, are there any special anniversary dates that mean something to you from your time in the service?
Surviving 100 years, dear.
That's wonderful.
And by the way, there's going to be a drive-by celebration.
Mhm.
Ernestine is going to be the boss of that. Ah, here it is. The date. 20 November. Celebration drive-by. City Airport. Is that showing?
Yes.
Can you see the bottom of it?
No.
No.
What he's trying to let you guys know is that he turns 100 on November 15th. So there's going to be a drive-by birthday celebration for him on November 20th at 1 p.m.
Okay.
At the Detroit City Library. I'm sorry, Detroit City Airport.
Okay.
So if you guys want to drive by and wave and say hello, you're more than welcome.
We sure will. And be sure to send me that information closer to the date also, so we can put something on our social media page at the library.
Okay, will do.
All right. Okay. I think we have maybe time for a few more questions, maybe one or two more. I have a question, just sort of, just general current event stuff. The Washington Redskins football franchise is considering a new name for the team, and they are considering on the short list the Redtails. How do you feel about that as a possible name for the new football team?
That's a new one.
Yeah, they're considering changing the Washington Redskins to some other names, but Redtails was mentioned on the short list. What do you think about that?
Might have to run it through and think about it.
I think Mr. Stewart already has a written opinion on that.
Okay, let's hear it.
I don't care for it, and the reason being is that I think of the anguish that the name Redskins caused with some people, and
oh yes,
if they use now the Redtails referring to the Tuskegee Airmen, I just feel as though we would be living on the anguish of others, and that's my feeling about it. And well, it's personal. That's all.
Understandable. Okay, so Michael was showing a while back slides where you can purchase both books written by Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart and Phil Handelman and Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson. You can buy their books. There was a link underneath those photos for the websites. So if you're interested, Michael can flash those again. We're recording this so that if you miss it, you can go back on our library website after a day or so to give us time to put it up, and you will be able to review this entire discussion again, and you will be able to see where you can purchase the books.
Vicki.
Yes.
Also let everyone know those books, the one for my grandfather, Alexander Jefferson, if you order it through his site, it is personally autographed. And the one for Mr. Stewart, if you order it through the link, which goes to the Detroit chapter site, those books are also autographed.
Thank you, Ernestine, you just did.
So there's a bonus by ordering it from both of those links. Those books will be autographed for you.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think that wraps up our discussion. Are there any final thoughts from either Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson and Lieutenant Colonel Stewart?
Thank you. It's been a great honor. Great honor for the distinction. And
okay.
I've enjoyed it. Give me a chance to rethink some of the adventures.
Yeah.
Life is a, well,
Thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure, really. Thank you so much.
And before you leave, we have our mayor. He's on board and he has his hand raised and he'd like to say something.
Gentlemen, as the mayor in this local community, I wanted to thank you for the presentation. It was outstanding. I got here a little bit late because I had another board meeting tonight, and I wanted to thank you for your service tremendously. My father was in the Marine Air Corps in World War II, and we in Northville even bought a P-51 Mustang. It cost $75,000, and we all tried to raise money. They didn't get enough. And it was called the Northville Mustang printed. So we understand the plane that you were in. We are the Northville Mustangs as a part of it because of that interlude. But I wanted to thank you tremendously. We have the life that we have and the freedoms in this country in part because of your service. So I want to thank you tremendously on behalf of myself and all the citizens in Norfolk for the presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if there are no other comments, thank you all for joining us this evening. I want to thank both Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Jefferson, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart for your service. I marvel at how positive and how just an inspiration you both are. And thank you again. We just can't thank you enough. And I also like to thank our friends of the Northfield District Library. Thank you so much for making this program possible. And so with that, everyone have a great evening.
Above and beyond.
Thank you.
Much. Thank you much. Beautiful.
Have a great Memorial Day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
City Airport. What time?
Thank you. Awesome.
Oh, thank you, Phyllis.
See you.